I walked into the packed divorce courtroom where my daughter-in-law sat cross-legged, lips curled in defiance, as her attorney declared coldly, "Her husband has no value, and the assets must be split in half." Whispers rippled through the crowd like waves, but I, the mother who had watched her son lose his legs in a work accident, felt the blood in my veins ignite. She had betrayed the man who once protected her, and now dared to claim the very house he built with his sweat and tears. I tightened my grip on the leather briefcase and strode straight through the stunned silence. The judge froze, eyes wide. "Mrs. Evelyn Hartwell, why are you here?" I set the briefcase on the table, my eyes never leaving hers. "Justice," I said quietly, "has finally awakened." She had no idea what lay inside that case would set the entire courtroom and her whole world on fire. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Evelyn Hartwell, 66 years old, once one of the most well-known female attorneys in Chicago before I left the profession nearly 20 years ago. People used to call me the Iron Lady of Justice until a case manipulated by money and power shattered my faith in the very system I served. I withdrew from the law, living quietly in a suburban home with my son Nathan, the child I raised alone after my husband left. I thought I'd laid down every weapon. But life always finds a way to pull you back, especially when someone dares to touch the one sacred thing I have: family. That morning the courtroom was jammed, sunlight slanting through frosted panes onto the worn wooden bench. The murmur of spectators rippled everywhere, then faded fast when Judge Arturo Delgado entered and tapped his gavel. I sat beside Nathan, my son, feeling his hand tremble in mine. Those hands had once been steady enough to lift steel beams weighing tens of pounds, but now they were only the faint warmth of a man life had struck without mercy. Across the aisle, Bianca, my daughter-in-law, sat at the defense table as if she owned the place. She crossed her legs, deep red heels tapping the floor like a taunting rhythm. Her brown waves were perfectly set, her fitted dress flaunting a cold, practiced confidence. Her family sat behind her mother, father, and a younger brother, each wearing the smug look of people who think the ending is already written. Bianca's lawyer, Camille Easton, a woman around 35, stood with the poise of someone sure she'd already won. Her voice carried through the room. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Bianca Cruz, seeks a divorce from Mr. Nathan Hartwell and demands an equal division of the marital home as a lawful marital asset." She paused, casting a faux pity glance at Nathan before continuing. "After a workplace accident, Mr. Hartwell is no longer able to work and cannot fulfill the role of a husband or father." Each word landed like a blade. I felt Nathan's shoulders twitch. He dropped his head, jaw clenched so hard I could see the blue vein at his neck. I placed my hand over his, a small squeeze of reassurance. Inside me, anger surged, but after years in courtrooms, I knew anger only seeds ground. I took a long breath, picked up my pen, and began jotting down the holes in their argument. Behind us, whispers rose. Some had recognized me. "Is that Evelyn Hartwell? She was a legend in Chicago." I heard it, but didn't turn. I once swore I'd leave this world forever after a case cost me everything: reputation, faith, and even my marriage. But today I knew I couldn't stay on the sidelines. When Judge Delgado looked up, his gaze stopped on me. "Mrs. Evelyn Hartwell, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. I'm here as legal counsel for my son, Mr. Nathan Hartwell." The room buzzed like surf hitting rock. I opened my worn leather briefcase, pulled out the signed authorization and court acknowledgement, and brought them to the clerk. Delgado reviewed them, then looked up with an expression mixing respect and caution. "Are you certain you want to handle this case yourself?" he asked. I answered plainly, "I've let others speak for too long. It's time to speak with the truth." Camille gave a small laugh, a touch of scorn in it. I didn't expect you to still be interested in the work after so many years of silence. I turned to her with a thin, blade-like smile. I didn't come back for interest. I came back for justice. Silence fell. Delgado cleared his throat, trying to restore formality. He tapped the gavel lightly and announced a 10-minute recess to verify my legal representation. I returned to the bench and looked at Nathan. His eyes were wet, full of shame and pain. I said softly, "I'm here now, Nathan. You're not fighting alone." He nodded, lips moving without sound. In his eyes, I saw something break and something kindle, a sliver of hope among the ruins. Bianca's irritation showed. She leaned back, arms folded, and whispered something to her attorney. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the look she shot me, part arrogance, part fear, the look I knew by heart from decades in court. When the hearing resumed, Delgado confirmed my representation. Camille objected, but he answered succinctly. "Mrs. Hartwell is a former member of the Illinois Bar. Her status is fully valid." A dry chuckle slipped from Bianca, but died quickly when I met her eyes. I could see her face shift, no longer the same easy confidence. "I believe justice will not be mocked," I said, low and clear, "and today I intend to prove it." Bianca curled her lip, mocking. "Justice? At your age, that's just an old story." I shrugged, smile unchanged. "Maybe, but old stories are often the ones that keep people up at night." The courtroom held its breath. Delgado watched us, then nodded to begin the next presentation. Camille restated the divorce demands, attaching medical evidence of Nathan's injury, photos of his legs in casts, and reports of reduced income. I listened quietly, marking every weak seam. They were trying to paint a portrait of a crippled, useless man to justify greed and betrayal. When Camille finished, Delgado turned to me. "Mrs. Hartwell, would you like to speak today?" I stood and tapped my pen lightly on the file in front of me. "Your Honor, their evidence is full of gaps. But I'll reserve my response for tomorrow when everyone can watch the truth come to light." I closed the briefcase. The sound cracked through the room. Eyes swung toward me, the silver-haired woman with a cool gaze and steady voice, burning inside like fire. The hearing ended with Judge Delgado's decision to recess and allow supplementary evidence to be verified. I rose, gathered my files, and looked at my son trying to steady himself on weakened legs. I walked over and murmured, "Now go rest. Tomorrow everything changes." Across the aisle, Bianca gripped her handbag and forced a smile, lips trembling. She didn't yet know the game had shifted to my hands, the same hands that once wrote arguments that made Chicago hold its breath. And in the briefcase I carried lay things that could upend the entire board, evidence that wouldn't just cost her everything, but would collect the debt from the reputation she thought she could buy. My son's divorce trial had only begun, but for me this was the last battle of my life, not just to reclaim a house, but to reclaim justice for a mother who'd stayed silent too long. I've often asked myself why some wounds don't heal after decades. Maybe because they aren't in the flesh. They're carved into memory, buried until someone brushes the dust and wakes them. I still remember that autumn night when my husband, Martin, set his dinner knife down and spoke in a hollow tone like reading a memo. "Evelyn, I'm leaving. I found a different direction for my life." I froze in the kitchen, ladle in hand, not grasping what I'd heard. On the table, the stew I'd cooked all day still steamed, its spices mixing with his cigarette smoke. Nathan, only 10 then, sat at the end of the table, wide-eyed, watching his father pick up a suitcase clearly packed in advance. The door opened, and headlights from a car in the drive stretched his shadow across the tile like a tear in the night. I didn't manage a word, just watched his figure fade toward the road to the suburbs, where a wealthy widow's mansion waited. People said she'd inherited a real estate company, but to me she was simply the woman who took my child's home. Nathan ran after him, crying, calling, but the engine swallowed every sound. That night I stayed by my boy, listening to rain drum the tin roof. He buried his face in a pillow, shoulders shaking. I stroked his hair and bit my lip so I wouldn't cry. If I collapsed, what would he hold on to? I whispered one sentence, so soft it was almost air. As long as I have you, I'll stand. I kept that promise for 30 years. The months that followed were a chain of weary days and stubborn nights. By day, I was a bookkeeper at a small firm on Chicago's South Side. By night, I did the books for a corner store, then a sewing shop, anything for a few extra dollars to cover rent and tuition. Every morning I biked Nathan to school, sometimes wading a flooded stretch of road. Clothes soaked, fingers numb, but his laugh made me strong. Nathan was my solace. He studied hard, never complained. When other kids' dads picked them up, he'd adjust his backpack and say, "It's okay, Mom, it's just us." I can't count the all-nighters we spent over textbooks. I only remember when morning bells rang, I'd sneak a look at his sleepy face and tell myself, this will be worth it. In high school, he dreamed of becoming a civil engineer. I knew it wouldn't. Be-easy college tuition then was higher than half a year of my income, but I wouldn't back down. One afternoon, he noticed my wedding ring missing from the little wooden box. "Mom, where's Dad's ring?" I smiled and kept my voice light. "I traded it for a chance at your future." That night I heard him crying in his room, and I didn't go in. Some tears have to fall on their own so a person can grow. Then one April day, Nathan burst through the door with a white envelope, out of breath. "I got in, Mom. Illinois Tech accepted me." I froze for a heartbeat, then hugged him tight. After almost a decade, I cried for joy. In college, Nathan studied and worked construction. He didn't fear sun or mud, and they started trusting him with important tasks. I still sent support money, even if it was only a few dozen a week. On his visits home, he'd say, "Mom, I'll pay it all back soon, I promise." And he did. After graduation, Nathan joined a major construction firm and rose fast because of his discipline and grit. I remember the day he took me to see a suburban lot, the same area we used to pass and admire houses lit up from afar. He said, "I want us to have a place we can truly call home, Mom." We saved every dollar, skipped every luxury. On weekends, I brought lunch to the site. Sweat beaded his brow, but he grinned. "Just a few more months, and you'll have a home of your own." When the little 2-story house was done, Nathan handed me the keys. His palms were calloused, arms sun-browned, eyes bright with pride. "Mom," I promised, "no one will ever throw us out again." I stood in the living room smelling fresh paint, tears spilling. For the first time in years, peace felt real. I hung a small photo on the wall of the two of us outside our old apartment as a reminder of how far we'd come. Those first evenings in the new house, I'd sit on the porch listening to crickets in the quiet sky. Inside, Nathan played soft, jazz, and read on the couch. No more arguments, no more silhouettes walking out into the night. Just the two of us, and the sense that life had finally offered a sliver of fairness. I started to believe old pain had bought today's peace. Nathan said he wanted me to quit working, to rest. I only laughed. I'm not sure I know how to rest. But deep down, I believed the struggle was over. I bought a lavender pot for the kitchen window. Each morning, sunlight filtered through the glass and painted a pale purple on the wall like a blessing. Nathan would tease, "Growing peace, huh?" I'd smile. Peace grows fast if you know how to keep it. Life drifted easy like a summer river. Nathan met Bianca at a construction seminar. She was young, lively, sweet, so sweet even I liked her. When they married, I believed he'd finally found what he'd missed in childhood. In the early years, I watched them laugh in the kitchen, talk about having a baby, and felt the weight lift. Then Lily was born with her father's bright eyes, and the house filled with laughter. I thought my life had come full circle from loss to renewal. But I was wrong. The peace I thought I was growing was a thin layer of soil over a hidden ravine. Tiny cracks appeared in ordinary places, late-night calls, unannounced trips, Bianca's sidelong glance when I asked about money. I never imagined the happiness I'd guarded with my youth would be smashed by the very woman I'd once called daughter. But that's a later chapter. In that moment, in the first house my son built with his own hands, I still believed peace was real, even if it was the calm before a storm. The accident came on a morning that seemed like any other. Nathan had left early with the lunch I packed. I stayed to tidy up and start dinner. At 7:30 a.m., the phone rang. I remember the tone, long, insistent, and when I picked up, a shaky voice said, "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm the site supervisor. Nathan. He was electrocuted. EMS is taking him to the hospital." I went numb, my body emptied of blood. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a hard crack. Images crashed over me, his smile that morning, his promise to be home for dinner, the sparkle in his eyes talking about a new project. I grabbed my keys and ran out like someone unhinged. At the hospital, the corridor stretched under harsh fluorescent lights. The disinfectant smell made me nauseous. When the doctor came out, I saw the gravity in his eyes before he spoke. The shock didn't take his life, but the fall from scaffolding more than 30 feet high severely damaged his legs. Nerves and muscle tissue are affected. He may walk, but he'll need crutches for life. It felt like a blade through my chest. The words "for life" echoed. I nodded, keeping steady, but when I looked through the window and saw his legs wrapped from thigh to ankle, tears flooded. For 3 days I stayed at his bedside. When Nathan woke, his first question was, "Mom, can I go back to work?" I held his hand, smiling with a broken heart. "We'll retrain, son. I'm right here." I learned everything the nurses taught: how to massage, muscle, stretch, and set a cane at the right angle. Every day I stood by his bed, lifting his leg inch by inch, counting softly. After the nurses left, I washed him, changed bandages, and quietly taped notes around the house. "Don't quit. You still have Mom." At first, Bianca came regularly. She brought chicken soup, fruit, even arranged flowers by the window. Whenever anyone entered, she took Nathan's hand and whispered, "I'll always be with you, no matter what." I wanted to believe. I looked at them and saw my younger self with Martin Faith still untouched. But faith is a thread fragile enough to snap with a single sigh. The day Nathan was discharged, I set up a room on the first floor for him and installed extra handrails along the hallway. Our once quiet house now had the tap-tap of crutches every morning. During the first meals after he came home, Bianca still smiled, checked on him, even fed him bites. But within a few weeks, that smile vanished. One evening, as I brought a plate of fish to the table, Bianca glanced at her phone and frowned. "I have to step out for a bit. You two go ahead and eat." Nathan stayed quiet. When the door closed, I heard his spoon touch the plate with a soft clink. "Mom, she's probably tired. There's a lot on her." I didn't answer. I just looked at my son, saw him try to smile, and saw the sadness in his eyes, like a winter lake. Meals grew heavy. Bianca started leaning on excuses: work, friends, a personal project. I never knew what was true, only that Nathan spoke less and less. Many mornings, I found him sitting on the porch with a cold cup of coffee, watching cars go by. One June afternoon, when Nathan said he wanted some fresh air in the yard, I offered to ask Bianca to help push his chair. She was doing her makeup in the bathroom. Her voice drifted out. "He doesn't need me. You can take him." I stood still for a beat, then quietly did it myself. I helped him into the yard and spread a small blanket on the grass. Nathan looked around and forced a smile. "It's okay, Mom. She just needs time." I smiled back, but it felt like a stone was pressing on my chest. Little signs began to show calls cut short when I walked by. A strange perfume in the car, fancy restaurant receipts I found by chance in Bianca's coat. I said nothing. My years in the field taught me that evidence speaks more clearly than feelings. Then one morning at the market, I overheard two neighbors chatting by the flower stall. That Hartwell wife, I saw her with some guy at the corner cafe. They were really cozy, not like co-workers. The other asked. Tall guy, gray suit? That's him. Drove a nice car. I stood behind them, gripping my tote until the green onions snapped. I walked on without a word. That night, when Bianca came home, I set dinner like usual. She ate a few bites and pushed the plate away. The fish is a little fishy, Mom. I just said, yeah, probably because I bought it late. But in my head, the doubts were lining up into a clear picture. I started logging when she left, who called, and when she returned. Not to control her, but because my gut told me a storm was coming. I'd seen that look before, the look of someone searching for an exit from a relationship, but not with honesty. Near midnight one night, I was making tea when I heard whispering from Lily's room, my granddaughter. Bianca's voice was soft but sharp as a blade. Do you remember what I told you? Tomorrow, if the teacher asks, you say you want to live with me. Got it? You can't stay with a sick person forever. Lily's voice was tiny, choked. I don't want to lie. I love Dad. Bianca's tone hardened. If you don't listen, we'll lose everything. Is that what you want? I stood in the hallway, heart pounding. My hand shook around the teacup, hot liquid burning down my wrist. Watching a mother force her 8-year-old to lie for custody made me want to burst in and scream. But I couldn't. I backed away into the dark. Every skill from my years as an attorney rushed back cold and precise. I understood. I had just heard the first proof of a legal scheme carefully planned to seize both assets and a child. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room under a soft yellow lamp. Nathan tossed and turned, his legs jerking in pain. His face was gaunt, skin gray from medication. I wanted to wake him and tell him everything, but I stopped. He had endured enough. I wouldn't add to it. Instead, I opened my old leather notebook, the one I'd shelved years ago, and started recording details. Dates, times, words, expressions. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a lawyer again, gathering evidence for a case not yet filed. The next morning, I made coffee and sat on the porch. Bianca came out dressed to the nines, lips a bold red, drowning in perfume. She gave me a thin smile. I'll pick up Lily after school and get dinner with a friend. Don't wait up. I nodded. Go ahead, Bianca. And take care of yourself. She glanced up, surprised for a split second, then walked away. When her car disappeared around the corner, I took a sip of bitter coffee, hands resting on the open notebook. The sun was bright outside, but inside me was only cold. I knew the storm had truly begun, and this time, I wouldn't let it sweep away what I'd already lost once, because this fight wasn't just about splitting a house. It was about guarding the soul of the child who carries the Hartwell name, the only one in this home who still knows the difference between truth and pretense, love and calculation. And I, the one who once vowed, as long as I have my child, I'll stand, now had to keep that promise again, not just for Nathan, but for Lily. That afternoon, the Chicago sky was a solid gray, low clouds sagging like they were ready to burst. I was warming up chicken soup when the doorbell rang, rapid, impatient. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the door. As it opened, an expensive perfume washed in with Bianca's icy voice. Behind her stood a young woman in a gray suit, sharp features, eyes cold as metal. I knew who she was the second I saw her. Camille Easton, an attorney who handles high-asset divorces, someone I'd faced in a property dispute 15 years ago. I won that time. "Hello, Mrs. Hartwell," Camille said with a thin smile, voice flat. "We're here to talk about the future." Bianca said nothing, just strode into the kitchen and tossed a thick stack of papers onto the wooden table. Bold letters on the cover, "Petition for Divorce." I looked down. Steam from the soup rose into the scent of fresh paper and ink, forming a tight, choking smell. "This is a draft of the divorce," Camille said, flipping pages like a demonstration. "My client, Mrs. Bianca Cruz Hartwell, demands an equal split of the house, monthly support, and full custody of Lily." Nathan came in from the living room, leaning on his crutch. His face went pale. "Split the house?" he repeated, voice tight like he'd swallowed a stone. "I built that house." "You built it," Bianca cut in. "But I live there. I contribute. And I'm not going to spend my life taking care of a cripple." My heart clenched. That word cripple fell from her mouth like a knife. Nathan staggered, gripping the edge of the table. I still remember my son's eyes when he heard his wife say that word. No mother forgets eyes like that. What about you? Have you ever witnessed a sentence that stabbed your heart like that? Write it in the comments. Sometimes sharing is the only way to soothe an old wound. Camille smiled, voice still polite. "We don't want to make things difficult, Mrs. Hartwell. If both sides can agree, my client won't ask for any additional assets." I lifted the papers and skimmed. The legal language spread out like a battle map. I could read the intent in every line. "This house was bought and titled before the marriage," I said evenly. "Under Illinois law, it's my son's separate property. There's no basis for a split." Camille tilted her head with a light smile. "I know you practice law, and I respect that. But I'm sure you haven't forgotten the doctrine of commingling assets. When a house is used as the marital residence over time, with investment or improvements made by both parties, money or labor, it can be considered a marital asset." She finished and flicked a glance at Bianca. A little victory signal. I nodded slightly, feeling that old mix of anger and clarity. They were trying to erode Nathan's ownership with a loophole, commingling the same. A tactic I'd seen countless wealthy people use to strip assets from the vulnerable. Nathan clutched the chair arm to steady himself. "What are you saying, Bianca? We can—" She turned to him, voice hard as stone. "Don't you get it? I'm done. You're not the man I married. I won't live with a burden." A sharp crash. Nathan had dropped his glass. Water spread in streaks, shards of glass glittering under the kitchen light. He bent, but his hands shook, and his crutch slipped. I rushed to catch him while Camille gathered her papers and backed toward the door, as if chaos was contagious. I looked up at Bianca. "You really think you can get custody of Lily after this?" Bianca sneered. "The court will decide, and I have a better lawyer than you." That line took me back to my courtroom days, how the most confident people were usually the ones about to fall the hardest. I set the papers back on the table and said calmly, "Then let justice speak, Bianca. But before that happens, I suggest you think this through." Camille tugged her client's sleeve and whispered, "We should go." Bianca adjusted her handbag, gave me one last look, and left. The trail of her expensive perfume stung the air like smoke. When the door closed, Nathan dropped into a chair, face drained. I crouched to pick up the shards. Tiny pieces bit into my fingertips, but I didn't feel pain, only cold. "Mom," Nathan's voice cracked. "What did I do wrong for her to change this much?" I looked up at my son, once strong and sure, now curled in on himself like an abandoned child. I set a hand on his shoulder and spoke softly. "It's not your fault, Nathan. Some people only love when life is easy. It's hardship that shows who's real." He bowed his head, tears falling onto the back of his hand. I let him cry. Some pain has to leave through tears, or it will harden and kill the soul. When he calmed, I cleaned the kitchen. The yellow light fell across the table. Dotted with water, the stew had gone cool. The air held the scent of fresh paper. I washed the glasses, put everything back in place, a small ritual to keep myself upright. That night in my office, I opened old files. I remembered clearly. The house was bought with Nathan's money before the wedding. The deed was in his name alone. I needed to find everything, receipts, contracts, bank statements, anything proving there was no commingling. I worked late, writing and calculating. My memory, the one people once said misses nothing, snapped back, crisp and cold like when I stood before juries. I laid out a plan. Step 1, review the deed, tax records, and material invoices. Step 2, check recent remodel bills mostly paid from Nathan's personal account. I remembered that. Step 3, compare Bianca's credit card statements. Did she truly contribute to this house or just spend on herself? I logged each item, careful down to the period. But I knew proving ownership wasn't enough. To knock down Bianca's plan completely, I needed motive why she wanted a divorce now. There was only one answer in my mind: an affair. Neighbor gossip, restaurant receipts, unfamiliar perfume, secret calls, pieces of a puzzle. I had to fit them into a picture that couldn't be denied. The problem was, I couldn't do it all myself. I needed someone who knew how to follow trails and gather evidence without tipping off the other side. Someone discreet, who understood the law, and most of all owed me a favor. Leaning back, twirling a pen, a name rose from the past like a ghost. Darius Cole. I hadn't contacted him in over 20 years. Darius had been a private investigator I partnered with on tough cases. He could find truth in details that looked like nothing. Thanks to him, I once won a case that freed a woman from an abusive marriage and kept her home intact. He left the field after that, moved to the western suburbs, and opened a small watch repair shop. I never thought I'd need him again, but that night, with wind pushing through the window and the clock ticking like a cold heartbeat, I knew I had no choice. I picked up the phone, hesitated for a few seconds, then dialed a number I thought I'd forgotten. 3 rings, then a click. A low, smoke-rough voice. Darius Cole. I drew a breath, slow and steady. It's me, Evelyn Hartwell. Silence stretched on the line. Then a soft chuckle, surprised and a little sad. I thought you buried my name with the past. This one's serious? I answered, each word heavy. Not just serious, personal. I need your help one last time. A sigh. Then Darius said, let me guess, justice again. No, I said, looking out at raindrops starting to spatter the glass. This time, it's family. When the call ended, I sat in the dark listening to wind in the trees. Fear and resolve blended inside me, sharp and burning. The real fight had begun. And I, Evelyn Hartwell, would not let anyone steal what my son built with blood, sweat, and legs that will never be the same. 24 hours after the call, I drove through Chicago's western suburbs to meet Darius Cole. His office sat on a strip of worn storefronts, a watch repair shop, an antique store, a cafe with a faded sign. The glass door was cloudy, still bearing the old, faint lettering, D. Cole, Private Investigations. When I pushed the door, the smell of smoke and old leather hit me familiar and aching. Under a warm yellow lamp in the small room, Darius sat behind a battered wooden desk, white shirt gone gray at the collar, a half-burned cigarette in his fingers. He squinted through the haze. Evelyn Hartwell, he said with a crooked smile, you still look like someone who's never taken a day off. I set my bag down and Saturday. We both know rest is a luxury. He stubbed the cigarette and leaned in. So, what is it this time? From your voice yesterday, sounds like more than a case. I opened my bag and pulled out a few notes. It's not. It's family. I told Darius everything: Nathan's accident, Bianca's change, the way she'd begun to manipulate an 8-year-old to set up the court. I laid out details, words, expressions, everything I'd observed. My voice roughened every time I said Lily's name. Darius listened, nodding, fingers tapping the desk. When I finished, he sighed. She's building a record for herself. Divorce, asset split, then custody. You're right, this isn't just betrayal. I nodded. I need evidence, clear, legal, heavy enough to make any attorney blink. She's cheating, I'm sure of it. I need you to find him and everything around it. Photos, transactions, meeting spots, but Lily stays out of it. No matter what, don't drag that child in. Darius went quiet for a long beat. "I understand," he said, pulling a small notebook from a drawer and jotting a few lines. "I'll start where trails are easiest: credit cards, appointments, hotel cameras. Someone like Bianca, once she crosses that line, leaves a glittering path on her way down." I managed a faint smile, but it didn't lift the weight. "We're old, Darius. I don't need a win for my name. I just need to protect my home." "You protected half this city," he said, voice low. "One little house won't beat you." We agreed. He'd tail Bianca quietly and document everything. I gave him Camille Easton's card so he could identify the friends and fixers around her. Before I left, Darius shrugged on an old leather jacket and half joked, "Last time I worked for you, I nearly got run out of town." "Let's hope this one ends with a few pictures." "I hope so too," I said, knowing full well a bigger storm might be waiting. 3 days later, a brown envelope arrived with no sender, just a handwritten note: "Open when you're alone." I waited until Nathan was asleep and the house was silent, then locked my office door and flipped on the desk lamp. Light washed over the envelope, picking out the creases. I opened it carefully. Inside was a stack of photos, clear shots, nighttime frames, neon reflecting off wet pavement. In the photos, Bianca had her arm around a tall, silvering man in a black suit, walking out of the Lakeview Crown Hotel, one of those places reserved for executives, and the well-heeled. Both were smiling, faces close. In the last shot, he held the car door for her, hand on her back in a way that was intimate to the point of brazen. Behind the photos was a packet: round-trip tickets from Chicago to Miami, high-end restaurant bills, bank statements with large anonymous transfers, and a membership card for an exclusive golf club under the name Preston Vale. I flipped through each page, and my heart turned to ice. I knew that name. Preston Vale real estate businessman, once splashed across the news for a string of scandalous romantic deals. Darius had even scrawled a note in his messy handwriting. Vale is notorious for luxury sponsorship cars, bags, houses, in exchange for which, when things sour, he uses contracts and the law to take everything back. Calling him the man who skins his lover's assets wouldn't be wrong. I set the photos down and tilted my head back, the room suddenly stifling. Bianca, the woman who once beamed on her wedding day, holding Nathan's hand and swearing forever, was now stepping into that ruthless game, willing to burn our home for fame and money. I folded the photos, slipped them into the envelope, and locked them in the safe. Nathan could not see these. His heart had been hurt enough. I knew that if he learned his wife was in another man's arms, he would crumble completely. I needed to keep this secret at least until I could turn it into a lawful weapon. That night, I opened my notebook again and drew an evidence map. Arrows linked the details: infidelity motive to divide, assets, motive scheme, to force the child to lie, forcing the child to lie, plan to seize custody, everything connected like a precise system that could collapse if the right pin was pulled. I needed that pin. At the top of the page, I wrote 3 bold words: objective, the truth. The next day, I met Darius at the old cafe by the river. He arrived 10 minutes late, coat soaked with rain, but still smiled. "Told you this one's worth coming out of retirement." He handed me another file, thinner, but it took my breath when I opened it. Inside were printed internal hotel emails showing Bianca had booked under the alias C. Rivera, with a note, paid with Vale's card. There was also a dinner bill from Le Jardin Rouge main course, double filet mignon, and 2 glasses of French wine totaling nearly $400. "I found more," Darius said, lowering his voice. "Vale's in a financial squeeze. He's done this with at least 3 women, put assets in their names, then used the law to claw them back. I suspect Bianca is the next mark, or an accomplice if she knows." I looked out through the rain-dappled window, city lights blurring on the river. "A woman like Bianca will never be the victim," I said quietly. "She calculates. She thinks she's running the board. "And you?" Darius asked, lighting a cigarette. "I don't play," I said. "I end it." He chuckled and coughed through the smoke. "Still the Evelyn Hartwell I know. That evening at home, I rechecked everything. I had proof of infidelity, photos, receipts, plane tickets, irregular financial trails, transfers from Preston Vale. Potential witnesses, hotel staff, limousine driver, golf club employee, proof of coercing a child to lie, the overheard conversation I recorded. I sorted them by category, labeled them, and stored them carefully in the safe. Each time the lock clicked shut, the metal thud felt cold but powerful, like the seal of justice. I knew what I had could flip the trial, but I wasn't ready yet. Everything had to be perfect, no loopholes, no easy rebuttal. I sat and made another short list. Witnesses to subpoena. Lakeview Crown front desk clerk handled the C. Rivera Reservation, Starline Car Service limousine driver who chauffeured Bianca and Vale, Le Jardin Rouge manager who can confirm the two-person reservation, Mrs. Noser, Davis neighbor who saw Bianca with the strange man, and if necessary, Darius Cole, independent investigative witness. When the list was done, I looked up at the family photo on the wall. In it, Nathan held Lily on his shoulders, and Bianca stood beside him, her hand in his. Their smiles then were bright, like they could never fade. Now it was just the two of us, Nathan and me, trying to save what was left after a storm called false love. I stood, locked the office, and turned off the light. In the dark, the rain's steady rhythm sounded like the city's heartbeat easing into sleep, but I didn't. Because I knew come morning it would be time to bring this evidence into the light. And then, mask by mask, they would fall, revealing the true face of betrayal, polished, cold, and rotten to the core. On the first day of hearings, Chicago was shrouded in fog. I remember each step up the courthouse stairs, the chill of granite through my heels, the smell of old paper and strong coffee drifting down the corridor, and the curious eyes that followed. Courtroom 3 was packed. Reporters crowded the back rows, camera lenses peeking over shoulders. I heard the whispers, "Is that her, Evelyn Hartwell, the defense queen from back in the day?" I didn't react. It had been a long time since that name meant anything in legal circles, but fate has a way of pulling you back to your battlefield, only this time I wasn't fighting for distant ideals. I was fighting for my son's roof. Judge Delgado entered, his black robe moving like a quiet wave. An old colleague, careful, principled, with a recorder's memory. We shared a small nod greeting and a silent acknowledgement that this wouldn't be an ordinary trial. Bianca's attorney, Camille Easton, led off. She stood straight, confident, and spoke in a measured cadence, her words crafted to evoke pity and judgment at once. "Your Honor," Camille began, "this marriage is beyond repair. My client, Mrs. Bianca Hartwell, is a young woman in her prime, forced to care for a husband who is disabled and diminished in both capacity and spirit. She isn't seeking pity, only a chance to start over and raise her child in a healthier environment." I felt myself go colder word by word. Disabled. The word rang again twice in a matter of weeks, this time from a stranger, delivered with the confidence of someone who thinks she understands Nathan's pain. Camille paused and glanced at my son. Nathan tried to stand to introduce himself. He braced on two crutches, fighting for balance, face tight with pain. A few feet away, Bianca gave a thin smile sharp as a blade. I caught that look, and inside me, a cold fire caught. When Camille finished, I asked to speak for the defense. Delgado looked at me with a flicker of surprise. "Mrs. Hartwell, you're formally representing Mr. Nathan Hartwell?" "I'm filing the authorization today, Your Honor," I said, voice steady. "And as defense counsel, I request to proceed." Whispers rolled across the room again. Many had come to witness what the woman who disappeared from the bar for 2 decades would do. I didn't care. I cared about my son watching me, with eyes full of hope and despair. I opened my familiar leather briefcase. The click of the latch sounded sharp in the heavy air. I pulled a stack of documents and handed them to the clerk. The deed, tax receipts, maintenance records, all in Nathan's name, purchased before the marriage. Your Honor, I said clearly, this house is not marital property and cannot be split. All purchase and improvement funds came from Mr. Nathan Hartwell's separate accounts, proven by bank statements and tax records. There is no commingling whatsoever, contrary to plaintiff's claim. Camille jumped in. Your Honor, the house served as the marital residence for over 6 years. Under the commingling doctrine, separate property may be considered marital when I cut in, calm but razor-edged. That doctrine applies only when there is clear evidence that the other spouse contributed financially or through substantial labor. We have detailed statements, every maintenance cost, repair, and property tax paid by Mr. Hartwell. Mrs. Bianca made no contributions other than enjoying the property as a beneficiary. Delgado peered over his glasses and nodded slightly. Noted. Mrs. Hartwell, do you have documentation to support your statements? All filed with the court, I said, opening another packet of receipts for the clerk. Additionally, I request leave to submit supplemental evidence within 10 days concerning infidelity and coercion of a minor to lie to the court. The room froze. I saw Camille's brow tighten and Bianca's fingers clamp on her handbag. She hadn't expected me to know. I kept my eyes on the bench. Delgado tapped the gavel. These claims must be verified. I'll allow supplemental evidence, but both parties will refrain from provocation or actions affecting the child. Understood, Your Honor. I dipped my head. Camille pivoted. Pending that, my client requests temporary custody of Lily in the interim to avoid psychological strain from living with an ill parent. Nathan jerked up, but I placed a hand on his arm. I stood, voice low and firm. Objection. Lily is emotionally stable, doing well in school, and bonded to both her father and grandmother. Separating her now would be severely damaging. We request shared supervised parenting time equal for both parties and overseen by Child Protective Services. Delgado considered, then nodded. That's reasonable. Temporary order. Shared care and visitation in equal measure. Neither party may restrict contact with the child until final judgment. I saw Bianca bite her lip, eyes sharpening, while Camille scribbled notes, calculating the next move. Nathan exhaled, but I only squeezed his hand gently. The war was long, and this was just the overture. When court adjourned, the hallway surged. Cameras clicked. Reporters pressed in. A middle-aged man thrust a mic forward, excited. Mrs. Hartwell, a word about your return after nearly 20 years? People are calling this the comeback of the defense queen. I paused and looked at him, then answered slowly. I'm not back to beat anyone. I'm here to protect my own and justice, even if sometimes it has to be woken by pain. Silence fell for a beat, then flashes popped again. I walked on without looking back. Behind me, I heard the murmurs. She's still got it. Evelyn Hartwell, still sharp as ever. Outside, Nathan waited, leaning on the car. When I reached him, he managed a thin smile. Mom, you really shut them up. I took his hand. They're only quiet for now, son. To truly win, we need the truth. And the heaviest blow is still in my hand. I said nothing more, but in my mind, I pictured the tiny USB locked deep in the safe recording, Bianca telling Lily to lie that she didn't want to live with her father, used at the right time, the right way. That evidence wouldn't just sink Bianca's case, it would expose the greed and cruelty behind her polished veneer. On the drive home, I looked out at the city, washed in late light. The streets were as noisy as ever, but inside me, a tide was rising. The battle had officially begun, and I, Evelyn Hartwell, who once walked away from justice out of disillusion, was Back to prove that no matter how the world shifts, the truth never loses its voice. The second hearing took place a week later. That morning was strangely dim, the air in the courtroom thick with expectation. I sat at the defense table, my hand resting on a small silver USB, the most crucial piece of evidence in the case. Part of me trembled, not from fear but from knowing too well, one procedural misstep and the whole case could collapse. Judge Delgado entered and nodded to both sides. Camille had arrived early, face tight but professional. Bianca sat beside her in a cream dress, eyes cold, lips pressed in confidence. Nathan sat at my side, thinner, tired but hopeful. As court began, Camille rolled out more arguments about Nathan's psychological instability after the accident and the need for Lily to live in a more stable environment. I listened, noting every weak seam. When Delgado asked, "Defense anything to add?" I stood. Chairs creaked, the room hushed. I opened my briefcase and took out the sealed USB. "Your Honor," I said, slow and clear, "I submit supplemental evidence and audio recording captured in Mr. Nathan Hartwell's home, demonstrating Mrs. Bianca Hartwell's coercion of a minor to lie to the court." Camille shot up. "Objection, Your Honor. The source is unverified, and recording my client without consent violates her privacy." I met her eyes, calm. "Your Honor, the recording was made in a shared area of the home where Mrs. Bianca had no reasonable expectation of privacy. Furthermore, the purpose wasn't to invade privacy but to protect the best interests of a child in accordance with the Illinois Child Protection Statutes." Delgado signaled the clerk to take the USB and play it. My heartbeat stayed slow and even. A little static, and then Bianca's voice, cold and clear. "You have to remember, Lily, when they ask, you say you don't want to live with your dad, okay? If you say anything else, they'll think I'm the bad one, and they'll take you from me." Then, Lily's voice, trembling and small as a breeze, "But I love Dad. I don't want to lie." A light slap sounded, and Bianca's voice hardened. "Don't argue with me. If you love me, you have to help me. Just say it and you'll stay with me forever." The courtroom went dead quiet. No one moved. I heard Nathan take a deep breath, and Delgado lifted his gaze, fixing on Bianca. She'd gone pale. She jumped up and screamed, "I was set up. She manipulated my child. This is staged." Camille tried to steady her client, but her voice shook. "Your Honor, we move to exclude this evidence. It lacks authentication and may have been edited." I stood again, voice level, blade sharp. "Your Honor, the audio comes directly from the family's internal security camera system, auto-saved with timestamps and certified by an independent technician. It also includes the child's voice, the person directly affected. Submitting this evidence is lawful and solely to protect the truth and the rights of a minor." Delgado studied me, then turned to Camille. "Miss Easton, any further objection?" Camille bit her lip and shook her head. "Very well," Delgado said, decisive. "The court accepts the USB as lawful evidence with high probative value in determining custody. I also order that Lily Hartwell be brought to court under the supervision of a child psychologist." The room stirred again. Bianca collapsed into her chair, white as paper. I saw Camille lean in and whisper something, and receive only a desperate shake of the head. An hour later, the door opened. Lily walked in tiny, in a pink dress, clutching a worn teddy bear. The psychologist set a gentle hand on her shoulder. Delgado's voice softened. "Hello, Lily. Are you scared?" She shook her head, though her big eyes were wet. "Do you know why you're here today?" "Yes, because people want to ask me. About my parents." "That's right. No one here wants to scare you. You just need to tell the truth. Can you do that?" Lily nodded and hugged her bear. Then, in a small but steady voice that filled the silent room, she said, "I love my dad. I don't want to lie. I don't want to choose between my dad and my mom. I just want to be with both." A long, breathless pause. I saw Delgado bow his head slightly, and a few reporters quietly wipe their eyes. Nathan covered his face, his shoulders shaking. Bianca suddenly sprang up, screaming, "She told the kid to say that! Evelyn, she planted it in her head! I'll sue you for invasion of privacy." I stayed seated and looked at her with a calm, almost cold gaze. "No, Bianca," I said softly. "She just said what she truly feels. And you just showed this court you're willing to trample a child to get what you want." Delgado rapped the gavel, voice stern. "Order! I will not allow anyone to threaten or attack a minor witness. Mrs. Hartwell," he turned to me, "the court recognizes your effort in presenting this evidence lawfully. The recording will be treated as highly probative in determining custody." The gavel struck 3 times, echoing off the walls, spreading through the room like the heartbeat of justice. Camille bowed her head and gathered her papers. Bianca sat frozen, lips trembling, unable to speak. Her family seated in the back row kept their heads down. No one dared look up. Nathan turned to me, tears running down his cheeks. "Mom, I can't believe it. Can I really get Lily back?" I took his hand and squeezed. "Not get back, son. She's finding her way home." I stopped there, even though I still held heavier evidence receipts, photos, and bank statements from Preston Vale. I didn't submit more. Not out of fear, but because the decisive blow must land at the right moment. Now the truth had spoken, and I wanted it to ring out pure, untainted by half spite. The hearing ended in silence. No one left right away. Everyone seemed to be processing what had just happened. I stepped out and felt a rush of cold air. In the hallway, reporters were waiting. Flashes popped and questions fired. "Mrs. Hartwell, have you really come back? Do you plan to practice again after this case? People are calling this the rebirth of the defense queen. What do you think?" I stopped, squinted against the lights, then simply smiled. "I'm not back," I said, voice low but warm. "I'm just standing where I'm supposed to, between the truth and a child who needs protection." The hallway went quiet again for a beat. Then cameras flashed, capturing me walking through the whispers, shoulders straight, silver hair catching the ceiling lights. On the courthouse steps, Nathan was waiting. He looked at me with a mix of gratitude and amazement. I set my hand on his shoulder and smiled. "See? Sometimes we don't need to shout to win. We just let the truth speak for us." Behind us, I heard the first light drops of rain on the cold stone steps. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Lighter because justice, the thing I once lost faith in, had just spoken in the clear voice of an 8-year-old child. And I knew the fight wasn't over, but the scale had begun to tip toward the light. The third hearing opened under a heavy mood, unlike the first 2. Reporters packed the hallway, lenses aimed at the courtroom door. Everyone knew today was evidence day, when both sides would lay out everything that could decide the divorce. I arrived early with few papers, just a black briefcase and 3 witnesses, people whose testimony alone could change the outcome. Delgado sat upright and tapped the gavel to begin. Camille wore her usual confident look, but I saw something unsteady in her eyes. Bianca avoided my gaze, hands clenched on her thighs, nails digging into her skin. I stood and spoke slowly. "Your Honor, I call 3 witnesses to clarify the relationship between Mrs. Bianca Hartwell and Mr. Preston Vale, whom we believe is directly tied to the motive for divorce and the property dispute." Delgado nodded. "Call your first witness." The door opened and a middle-aged man in a hotel uniform entered. It was Ethan Morales, the front desk clerk from the Lakeview Crown Hotel. He walked in slowly, slightly bowed, holding a packet of statements. I stepped closer. "Mr. Morales, do you recall a guest named C. Rivera booking a room at your hotel on March 17th? He nodded. "Yes, luxury room, 12th floor. Female guest, accompanied by a man named Preston Vale. Can you confirm they stayed in the same room?" Yes, ma'am. I was on duty. They arrived around 7 p.m., left the next morning. The courtroom fell silent. I heard reporters' pens scratching. Delgado motioned for me to continue. Did you observe any behavior between them that was intimate or beyond a professional relationship? Mr. Morales glanced quickly at Bianca, then answered, I don't want to say anything improper, but… They held hands, laughed together. Mr. Vale called her sweetheart in front of me. Camille jumped up to object. Your Honor, this is subjective and doesn't prove infidelity. I turned to Delgado, steady. We also have physical evidence. I drew a large envelope from my briefcase and displayed the photos. On the screen, images appeared. Bianca and Preston hand in hand exiting the Lakeview Crown Hotel, Bianca in a red evening gown, Preston in a dark coat with his arm around her waist. Then a shot at Miami's airport, both at the business class counter and a matching hotel bill from Florida during the same time. Nathan was in rehabilitation, confined to a therapy center. I left the final image up, Bianca receiving a gift box from Preston, a diamond-studded gold necklace priced at over $8,000 per an expert's invoice from Varelli Jewelers. These photos, I said evenly, were taken while Mr. Nathan Hartwell was in physical rehabilitation, needing financial and emotional support. During that time, Mrs. Bianca Hartwell, rather than caring for her husband, spent her time and resources on outings with Mr. Vale. This is betrayal and direct evidence that the motive for divorce isn't emotional breakdown, but material gain. Camille was quick. Your Honor, adults may socialize. Mr. Vale is a family friend, and these trips and gifts could be emotional support. I didn't answer right away. I smiled slightly and produced a second file. If it's just support, I said, why route the money through two shell companies? Delgado tilted his head. Explain, Mrs. Hartwell. I stepped to the lectern and opened the file. These bank statements show that over the last 3 months, more than $120,000 was transferred from Vale Holdings through an account at Arden Consulting LLC, one of Mr. Vale's subsidiaries, into Mrs. Bianca Hartwell's personal account. They're labeled consulting service, but Mrs. Hartwell performs no consulting work. Camille cut in. Nothing unusual. My client could have done freelance work, marketing, or design for Mr. Vale. I closed the file and looked straight at her. Then why hide it from her husband? Why, if innocent, were the transfers split into smaller amounts, routed through an intermediary, and withdrawn in cash only hours later? Delgado rested his chin on his hand, voice even but cold. A fair question, Mrs. Hartwell. He turned to Bianca. Can you explain why these transfers were concealed? Bianca stammered, lips trembling. He helped me. I was struggling. It was nothing else. Delgado arched a brow. Financial help between friends, I understand, but totaling over $120,000 in 3 months through a shadow account? Do you find that reasonable? Bianca stayed silent. The room sank back into quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat steady and firm. I continued. The court should also note these transfers align with the timing of Mrs. Bianca filing for divorce and seeking half the assets. This is a deliberate pattern, leveraging her relationship with Mr. Vale to build funds for a new lifestyle, what she called financial freedom, in an email to a close friend that we obtained. I paused, then added, the endgame, selling my son's house to free up cash for reinvestment. That's not just marital betrayal, it's a plan to seize property. Camille tried one last counter, voice tightening. Your Honor, we haven't examined Mr. Vale. He can verify these were legitimate investments. Delgado looked to the clerk. Has the court's subpoena to Mr. Vale been served? Your Honor, the clerk replied, all 3 attempts were returned. Mr. Vale left the state of Illinois 2 days ago, with no forwarding address. A low rumble swept the courtroom. Reporters wrote furiously. Bianca hung her head, hands shaking. Nathan sat still, eyes wet but for the first time in months, bright. I took a deep breath. "Your Honor," I said, "given this evidence and the risk of asset dissipation, I move for an asset preservation order on the Lincoln Park home, legally owned by Mr. Nathan Hartwell. We request a temporary bar on any sale, transfer, or encumbrance until final judgment." Delgado reviewed the file once more and nodded. He lifted the gavel and spoke each word clearly. "The court grants Mrs. Hartwell's motion. The property at the Lincoln Park address is hereby placed under an asset preservation order. Neither party may sell, mortgage, or transfer title in any form until final ruling." The gavel's crack sounded dry and heavy. A ragged breath came from Bianca's row. She bowed her head, dark hair half covering her face. Camille said, "Nothing," her knuckles white around her pen. I sat, hand on my briefcase, feeling my pulse settle. Nathan turned and took my hand. He didn't speak, just squeezed a thank you without words. Behind us, reporters rushed for the doors, phones chiming. The headline, "Evelyn Hartwell flips the case, asset freeze ordered in Chicago, all but guaranteed by afternoon." Delgado tapped the gavel again and adjourned. I stood, gathered my files. In my mind, the old voice, my own from years ago, back when I was the defense queen, whispered, "No power is untouchable, only unexposed." Now the light had reached Bianca and the man behind her, Preston Vale. And I knew they had nowhere left to hide. Outside the courtroom, the sky had cleared. Thin sunlight spilled over the cold stone steps, flashing across the glass like a long blade of light. I lifted my chin and drew in the fresh air. Inside, there was no thrill of victory, only the calm of someone who had nudged justice back onto its track. The fight remained, but from here on, the board was mine. And for the first time in a long time, Chicago's morning felt truly beautiful. I thought that after the financial blow, Bianca would go quiet to salvage her reputation. I underestimated her arrogance. At the next hearing, the moment we began, Bianca suddenly stood, eyes blazing, voice tight but still defiant. "Your Honor," she said, turning toward the reporters, "everyone praises Evelyn Hartwell as some symbol of justice, but the truth is, she left the law not out of principle, but because of a humiliating failure. Everyone knows she lost that case horribly, was exposed by her own colleagues, then disappeared." A wave of whispers rolled through the courtroom. I saw Nathan pale. Delgado frowned but let her finish. Camille, apparently blindsided by the move, sat still, eyes down, as if she didn't want to watch her client sink further. I rose, refusing to be led by emotion. "Your Honor," I said, my voice low and steady, even surprising myself, "if the truth about my past helps clarify the character of those standing in this room, I'm willing to tell it." I walked to the lectern, fingers brushing the old leather briefcase, a companion through nearly 30 years of practice. "Yes," I said to the crowd, "I left the law 19 years ago after Richardson versus Stonehill Corporation, a case where I represented the families of 4 workers who died in a building collapse. They were poor, but I believed in justice and that my evidence was strong enough to hold the corporation accountable." I paused, remembering the smell of cement dust and the widow's cries. But the final ruling cleared the corporation. In my heart, I knew justice had been sold. I had no proof. I refused to be a pawn in a dirty game, so I walked away. Not because I lost, but because I refused to win by compromising with wrongdoing. A heavy silence settled. I opened the briefcase and took out an old newspaper, browned with age. Years later, the Chicago Tribune ran an investigation. They found that presiding Judge Harold Whitmore took more than $500,000 in bribes from Stonehill to fix the verdict. He was sentenced to 12 years. Here's a copy of the article. I can submit it if the court wishes. I handed it to the clerk and turned to Delgado. He stood there for a moment, then rose. His eyes, once my junior colleague, held undisguised emotion. "Your Honor," Delgado said, voice deep and firm, I confirm that at the time I worked under Mrs. Hartwell's guidance. She was the one who taught me professional ethics. Without her, I might have taken the easy path like many others. I have absolute faith in her integrity. The room was silent. Cameras stopped clicking. Nathan looked at me, eyes shining, astonished as if seeing a different mother than the one he thought he knew. I smiled faintly and looked back at Delgado. Thank you, Your Honor. I don't bring this up for sympathy. I want only to say this: I'm not here for reputation or to settle old scores. I'm here for my family, and because this truth is worth standing up for one more time. Delgado nodded, respect plain in his eyes. The record will reflect your statement. I turned to Bianca now, sitting quiet, face pale, eyes averted. The arrogance was gone, replaced by confusion and fear. I didn't need to say more. The truth had already answered. Perhaps realizing the tide had turned completely, Camille rose and spoke softly. Your Honor, we request a brief continuance to review the evidence and prepare our response. I nodded. We agree, Your Honor. Delgado tapped the gavel. Court is recessed for 3 days for both sides to supplement their filings. I sat and gathered my papers. Nathan whispered, Mom, I never knew you went through that. I always thought you left because you were tired. I placed my hand over his and smiled sadly. No, son. I left to keep something more important than a name, my self-respect. In those brief 3 days, I didn't rest. I spent nearly all my time auditing the financial file, cross-checking every expense tied to Bianca and Preston. I brought in an independent expert, Nancy Kramer, a former IRS auditor. She went line by line through numbers, receipts, and the shadow accounts Darius had traced. You've built this well, Nancy said, setting the file down. I can confirm most of Bianca's spending shows signs of laundering. Money comes in, then goes out immediately, leaving no trail. This isn't just a marital ethics issue. It could be a financial crime if the court requests an investigation. I nodded and said quietly, We don't need to go that far. Proving she did all of this for money is enough. Late one night, my phone rang. Darius. His voice was rough as ever, but with a hint of satisfaction. Evelyn, you'll want this. Preston Vale just cut the cord with Bianca. I froze. Cut the cord? How? He transferred all personal assets into his sister's name, shut down any credit cards linked to Bianca, and changed his number. My source says he smells a loss coming and wants to slip away from the scandal. I leaned back, feeling relief tinged with bitterness. A man who lives off other people's money, I said softly, is always the first to run when the storm hits. Darius laughed gravelly. You used to say justice doesn't have to shout. It just has to stand. Looks like it's standing again. Not yet, I answered slowly. The last round is when people show who they really are. And you're about to land the finisher? I don't need to finish her, I said. She'll finish herself. Darius chuckled and hung up. I sat alone in my office, the desk lamp glowing over neatly stacked files. A chill October draft slipped in through the window. I glanced at the small photo on my desk. Nathan and me on his engineering graduation day, our smiles bright in the Sunday. I whispered to myself, an old vow returning. This time, son, I won't let anyone take what you deserve. Far off, the church bells tolled steadily in the night. I closed the file and felt a strange calm. The storm was near, but this time I held the reins. That morning, Chicago's sky was leaden, and the first winter wind sliced across the courthouse steps as if the weather itself was holding its breath. Courtroom 3 was packed. Neighbors, Nathan's old friends, and strangers who only knew the story from the news all were there. In the back, reporters had their cameras ready, lenses trained on the bench. I walked in with my familiar briefcase. Nathan moved slowly beside me, still on crutches, but his eyes were brighter than ever. Lily sat in the last row with the psychologist, hugging her old teddy bear, the small symbol of hope she'd clung to through the hearings. Bianca was already there. She wore a black suit, makeup carefully done but pale underneath. Camille sat beside her, composed, but her fingers kept worrying a pen, as if bracing for something to come crashing down. When Delgado walked in, the whole room stood. The air was thick. No one spoke. No one breathed hard. Delgado sat down and tapped the gavel lightly. The People's Court of the State of Illinois, the sentencing hearing in the divorce case between Mr. Nathan Hartwell and Mrs. Bianca Hartwell, is now in session. I stood and stepped to the lectern one last time. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried clear, even, and firm. Your Honor, throughout these proceedings, we have provided a consistent chain of evidence from ownership documents and financial statements to witness testimony, proving that the home in Lincoln Park is the separate property of Mr. Nathan Hartwell, purchased and titled before the marriage, with no commingling of assets. All repair, maintenance, and improvement costs have been shown to come from Mr. Hartwell's separate funds. Therefore, Mrs. Bianca's request to split the property has no legal basis. I paused a beat, looked toward Delgado, then continued, my voice dropping lower. Furthermore, the sequence of events in the record shows intentional conduct by Mrs. Bianca Hartwell, an affair with Mr. Preston Vale, receipt of suspicious financial transfers, and the coercion of a minor to lie in court in order to seize both custody and property. These actions not only violate marital ethics but also threaten the child's emotional development. I turned to the back row, where Lily sat, her eyes wide and wet. Your Honor, I said, I'm not asking to win. I'm asking for justice for a child who was forced to lie. The room went silent. Delgado tilted his head, a rare emotion flickering in his eyes. He nodded slightly, then spoke. Thank you, Mrs. Hartwell. Does the plaintiff have anything to add? Camille stood, but this time her voice lacked confidence. Your Honor, my client believes. No need. Delgado cut in, calm but firm. The court has reviewed the record in full. He looked down at the thick stack of papers before him and began to read the decision. Each word rang out clear, cold, and fair, like metal striking stone. After reviewing the entire record, the court grants the petition for divorce between Mr. Nathan Hartwell and Mrs. Bianca Hartwell. Based on proven ownership documents, financial statements, and vetted testimony, the court finds that the home in Lincoln Park is the separate property of Mr. Nathan Hartwell, not part of the marital estate, and his ownership is preserved in full. Regarding custody of the minor child, in the best interest of the child, the court awards joint guardianship to Mr. Nathan Hartwell and Mrs. Evelyn Hartwell. Mrs. Bianca Hartwell is permitted to visit her daughter Lily twice per month under the supervision of a social worker. Mrs. Bianca Hartwell's requests for financial support, including periodic support and division of assets, are denied for lack of legal basis. The court also notes deceptive statements in the testimony of Mrs. Bianca Hartwell and will forward the relevant file to the prosecutor's office for further review. The gavel struck once more, echoing through the hushed room. Then, almost at once, the first sound broke Nathan's sobs. He dropped his head onto my shoulder, his shoulders shaking. Mom, we won. I held my son, flooded with a mix of relief and ache. Not because of victory, but because to reach this day we lost so much time, tears, and a faith once torn to shreds. Lily ran over and wrapped her arms around us both. She hiccuped through tears. Grandma, Daddy, can we go home now? I nodded softly, resting my hand on her hair. Let's go home, sweetheart, our house is still there. A small round of applause rose from the back, at first just a few neighbors. Then the whole courtroom stood. Not out of curiosity, not out of excitement, but because fairness had just been restored. Across the aisle, Bianca shot to her feet and screamed, "It's not fair! I can't lose everything like this! I'll appeal!" This court was biased toward her. Camille hurried to pull her client down, trying to steady her, but Bianca yanked away, eyes wild. "She ruined me! Evelyn Hartwell, you destroyed my life!" I looked at her for a moment, then spoke gently. "No, Bianca, you did that yourself when you chose lies over truth." Delgado brought the gavel down hard, voice stern. "Order! If Mrs. Bianca does not comply, she will be removed from the courtroom." Camille bowed her head and whispered something to her client. At last, Bianca dropped into her seat, eyes empty. I saw her shoulders shake, not with rage now, but with despair. Her family quietly packed up, avoiding everyone's gaze. As they left, the hallway buzzed some pity, some contempt, but no one believed in the poor wife image Bianca had crafted anymore. Nathan turned to me, his eyes softening. "Mom," he said quietly, "I don't know how to thank you." I smiled and set my hand against his chest. "You don't owe me anything. I only did what a mother must do." Delgado gathered the files, then looked at me. His eyes were no longer those of a judge toward counsel, but of an old friend, deep with respect. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, "justice may be slow, but it never sleeps. Today I'm honored to see it wake again under your hand." I bowed my head. "Thank you, Your Honor." As we stepped out of the courtroom, cold wind hit our faces with a strange clarity. Dry leaves spun underfoot, weak sunlight threaded through gray clouds. I lifted my eyes to the imposing building behind us, the place that once hurt me enough to make me walk away from my career, now the place that closed a circle of justice. I felt no gloating, no triumphant joy, only a quiet sadness. I was sad for Bianca, someone who had everything, but chose to lose herself to greed. I was sad for people like her, who believe money can buy everything, even a conscience. Nathan held my hand tight. Lily walked between us, her small hand in both of ours. She looked up and asked softly, "Grandma, we don't need court anymore, right?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. "That's right, sweetheart. Now we just need love." And as we walked down the stone steps, I knew justice, though it may sleep long, will always wake in the light of truth. November drifted by at an oddly slow pace. After the hearing, the press roared for a week, then went quiet as if the whole city exhaled at once. But in another corner of Chicago, a woman was paying the price for her own choices. Preston Vale vanished from the city. Accounts, companies, phone numbers closed or reassigned. Bianca was left completely alone. I heard from Darius. She moved into a shabby apartment on the south side, sold most of her jewelry to pay legal fees. The people who used to flatter her now slipped away, afraid to be tied to a name that had become a symbol of deceit. As for me, I chose not to look back. No resentment, no gloating. Just a small pity for a woman who had everything, a family, a daughter, a home, but traded it all for hollow glitter. In the days after the storm, I returned to what truly matters, healing. Nathan still had physical therapy every day. I went with him to the center, sat in the bright waiting room, listened to soft music and the steady roll of wheelchair wheels on wood floors. "How do you feel today?" I asked. Nathan smiled, sweat beading on his forehead. "A little better than yesterday. The doctor says a few more months, and I might ditch the crutches." I nodded gently. "One step at a time, son. Every step is a win." Every evening when we came home, Lily would run to the door, clutching messy drawings from school. She chattered about class, new, friends, and how her teacher praised her reading. Dinner had laughter again. The smell of baked goods filled the kitchen, blending with the sound of chopping vegetables and a spoon tapping a soup pot. I realized how long it had been since the house held that simple sound, the sound that makes you feel alive. Some afternoons I stood in the kitchen watching Nathan and Lily cut paper for cards, sunlight angling through the window to paint a gold streak across the table. It took me back to when Nathan was little, his eyes lit the same way whenever I brought home a small treat after work. One Sunday afternoon, while I watered plants on the porch, Lily came out in my old high heels, the pair I wore at my very first trial more than 30 years ago. "Grandma, look," she chimed. "I'm a little lawyer. I'm going to protect justice like you." She wobbled a few steps, clutching a small notebook, her voice solemn. "Your Honor, I present evidence that cookies should be divided equally among everyone in the house." Nathan and I both burst out laughing. He watched his daughter with warm, proud eyes. No more shadows, no more bitterness, just the look of a father who had learned how to believe in happiness again. I watched them, peace blooming rare and full in my chest. After years in law, I'd witnessed countless cases, testimonies, and broken lives. But I had never felt justice so close as I did now in a child's smile, a father's hug, the warmth radiating from a small kitchen. I whispered to myself and to any unseen listener out there, justice sometimes sleeps, but it never dies. It waits for someone brave enough to call its name. That evening, Darius stopped by. He brought a small wooden frame. Inside was a photo of me, Nathan, and Lily, taken after the hearing, a picture a reporter had sent him, saying, "It deserves to be kept." He set it on the shelf, among old family photos. "I think," Darius said, "that's a beautiful period it played, the end of my last job." I looked at the picture and smiled. "As for me," I said, "it might be time to put this briefcase away. It's been through enough battles with me." "And now what?" he asked, a little curious. "I'll write," I said softly. "Maybe I'll write it all down, not to boast, but to remind those who come after. Don't let justice sleep too long." Darius laughed, eyes mapped with age. "I hope I get to read it. And I believe a new generation will learn something from Evelyn Hartwell." When he left, I stayed by the window. Outside, the sunset bathed the little garden in gold. Nathan was helping Lily replant the lavender, and her laughter rang like wind chimes. I sat at my desk and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote the opening line of a future memoir. I once thought justice lived in the courtroom. In truth, it lives in the hearts of those who choose honesty, who rise after being knocked down, and who dare to believe in goodness. I paused, looking up, my heart light as air. From a distance, Lily ran toward me, high heels clacking on the wood floor, hair flying. "Grandma, teach me one more thing." I laughed and opened my arms. "Okay, last lesson for today." I bent down and looked into her clear eyes. "Lily, remember this. Truth is your weapon, and kindness is your shield. Carry both, and you'll never fear injustice." She nodded, grinning bright. "I promise, Grandma." I hugged her, feeling that small heartbeat steady against me. Outside, purple dusk replaced the sunset. In the warm light of our home, laughter stretched long, the laughter of a family that had weathered the storm and found peace again. And I knew our story, the story of 3 Hartwell generations, closed not with triumph, but with the rebirth of faith. This morning, I brewed hot tea, licorice scent drifting through the kitchen. Morning sun slipped through the maple leaves outside, laying soft gold across the table. The house was so quiet I could hear wind at the window and sparrows tapping the eaves, tiny sounds I had ignored for years. In the yard, Nathan took his first steps without crutches. He focused, breathing hard, sweat beading on his brow. Lily stood nearby with a stopwatch, her clear voice ringing out. 1, 2, 3. "Daddy, you did it." Nathan laughed and opened his arms, and she flew into his hug. From the porch, I watched with a swelling pride and gratitude I could barely name. All the pain, all the battles were for this simple moment. A father standing, a child laughing, and a home still warm. I sat by the window and sipped my tea. Heat traveled down my throat, warming me to my heart. In that moment, I thought of mothers out there quietly enduring, overshadowed in their own homes. I wish they could see this. I wished they knew that one day their voices can be heard and light can return, even if late. On the shelf, the old photo album lay waiting. I opened it. The first page held a picture of me in a black suit, standing before the courthouse, sharp eyes, dark hair, a faint, steady smile. The next page was today. Nathan holding Lily, me beside them, silver hair shining in the Sunday. 2 photos, 2 eras, one meaning: never surrender. I closed the album, my hand resting long on its worn cover. I realized the greatest victory of my life wasn't Delgado's ruling, nor the applause that day. The true victory was reclaiming my voice, the voice of a mother, a woman, and a person who refuses to be silent in the face of injustice. I took a sheet of paper and wrote a small letter to my younger self. Dear Evelyn, the one who trembled walking out of court in disappointment, don't be afraid, don't regret. One day, your son will stand tall, and your granddaughter will call you a hero. Believe it, because belief is where justice begins. I folded the letter and tucked it into the old briefcase, the thing that has carried me through almost every fight of my life. I ran a hand over its worn surface and smiled. Maybe it's time to let it rest. But I also know, if someone needs it, if justice is forgotten again, I will open it once more. The oven timer chimed in the kitchen, pulling me back to the present. Butter and cinnamon filled the house. A small cake, golden and gently cracked on top, cooled on the counter. I set it on the table and placed 3 little candles, not to celebrate victory, but to thank the kindness that still remains. Nathan stepped in from outside and leaned on the doorframe. What are we celebrating, Mom? I smiled. That the wounds have closed inside and out. He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Lily ran over and hugged my waist. Grandma, today let's win forever. I laughed and whispered, yes, sweetheart, but this is a victory for kindness, not for hate. Thank you for staying with me to the end of my story. I know this journey was long and full of pain, but if you're hearing my voice now, it means you still believe in goodness and you still want to see justice brought back to life in places that seem silent. I truly want to know, where are you listening from? What city? What country? Leave a comment with your thoughts or your own story. I promise to read every line, just as I once read every case file with all my respect. If you feel this journey was worth it, please hit like, subscribe, and stay for the stories to come. Every moment you stick around, every word you share, is the warmest gift to a grandmother like me, someone who still believes small stories can soothe big hearts. That afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the buildings, I leaned back in my wooden chair and watched father and daughter playing in the yard. A breeze carried the smell of baked goods and a child's laughter. I closed my eyes, smiled, and said to myself, we can't change the past, but we can teach our children to recognize truth and kindness, and that is how the future changes. And so my story closed in sunlight, laughter, and the faith that justice, though it may sleep, will always be awakened by hearts that refuse to be silent.